Hello, I'm Danielle Ramos, and welcome to the Product Management Workshop on creating a press release. So I'd like to start off each of these workshops with a little bit of a reminder about why we're here talking about product management. Well, for 2020, P&T selected implementing a standard product management framework as one of the top objectives for the year. I'd like to also give a little bit of context about why it's important. So P&T leadership worked with the Gardner Group last year and came up with a lot of materials about why implementing product management at T-Mobile is a really good idea. And these are some of the key highlights that they came out with. The first thing is that products are defined by how they're consumed rather than how they're produced or the functionality that they offer. Next, they talked about some role changes and mindset changes that P&T would need to undergo in order to implement effective product management. First, they mentioned many times it's a mindset change. It's not just a new process or a new tool, and mindset changes are a little tough. And they also said that there's going to be some significant role rebalancing or changes in the roles that we have. And they advise that we provide radical transparency to the staff about the changes so that people in roles that are not going to be as abundant or prominent in the future, those people have a chance to understand the new roles and learn future skills and competencies so they can transition into those roles. Here's a kind of like a theoretical roadmap of role changes that they envision. First of all, is there's going to be some roles that are not going to be as abundant: business analysts, project managers, and low-cost developers. Then they said, you know, you guys have data architects and enterprise architects. You guys should maintain those at about the same level that you have today. And then finally, they said there's roles that you need to grow. So those are full stack engineers, DevOps engineers, product architects, user experience designers, and product managers. And finally, all of this is in aid of enabling a really competent digital business. So they said these are the competencies that you need: business acumen, adaptability, political savviness, fusion collaboration, and systems thinking. So let's go back to what Gardner said. The first thing is products are defined by how they're consumed rather than how they're produced or the functionality that they offer. So usually when we come up with a new product, we visualize it, then we design it, and then we build the product, and then we launch it, and then we check out the customer response, and we gather feedback, and we then iterate and build new things into the product to make it even more desirable to the customer. And then we iterate again. We get more feedback and iterate, and we keep iterating until we get the product to a position where the customers are just loving it. So that's how we do things normally. Let's talk about it a little bit of a different way. What if instead of going forward from product visualization all the way out to customer experience, we started with customer experience and we worked backward, and we pretended like we launched the product, and then we can go back and we can look at how we would build it to fit the launch, and how we would design it to fit the launch, and what the product really should look like from the start in order to have the best customer reception. That's called working backwards. So why work backwards? Well, let's try a little experiment. Read the sentence on the page. All right, now read the same sentence backwards. Did you see it? All right, well, when you read the sentence backward, you notice that there are two thes. There is a mistake in the sentence. And so we're logical creatures. Our brains work in a very logical way. And so when we're reading, our brain wants to move forward. And so if it sees something that doesn't quite fit or is not logical, it just skips over it and continues forward. And that's what we do all the time. We just kind of overlook things that are mistakes or could be mistakes, and we just move forward. So what do they always say? Hindsight is 20/20, right? So this is one case for working backwards. Okay, let's go. What's thinking backwards? How do I do that? All right, let's talk about it. So some of you may remember a movie from the 80s called Back to the Future, and we're kind of talking about going back to the future. So we're talking about projecting ourselves forward to product launch and looking at it from the customer's perspective at that point. And then the magic thing is we can go back into the current time and we can change things to make it so it turns out the way that we want. So let's go back to the future. Okay, so back to the question, how do I go to the future, or how do I project myself forward and work my way back? Well, what do you do when you launch a product? Well, you have a press release, right? So why don't we start with the press release? So we're going to go through a whole press release today, but let's start from the beginning. So the first thing in a press release is what? It's the big title or the headline. So we're going to use a T-Mobile typical press release for our example here. And this one is on T-Mobile Money. And here it says, bye bye big banks. Hello T-Mobile Money. All right, so it's kind of exciting, catches your attention, and that's what it's supposed to do. So after the title, we have a chance to add a little bit more via the subtitle. And this can just add a little bit more information. Now, if it's redundant, you can skip it and move to the opening. But let's take a look at what we did here. As more and more Americans manage their money on smartphones, the Un-carrier steps up to make mobile banking better. All right, well, that's a pretty good augmentation. Let's move forward. And I really like this about T-Mobile press releases. They always get right to the what, why, and who, and they just give you some really good information up front. This could actually be the opening, or in T-Mobile's case, it's an augmentation to the opening. So they talk about why is it news, what is it, and why it matters to you, and who is it for. In this case, it's for anyone tired of bank fees. All right, well, that's also pretty cool. So you can see that this is gathering more interest as we go. So let's move on to the opening. So after that, we have the opening statement, and the opening statement should be where you really try to fill in as much of the really key information as you want, because your customers, again, might walk away after reading the opening, but you want to give them the information they need to know about this new exciting product. So now we're going to where you probably started. You probably started your quest thinking about a customer problem that you think you can solve with your product or feature. And that's the next part of the press release. It's the problem statement. And in this example, you'll see that the problem statement talks a little bit about the problem and then talks a little bit about the solution that you're introducing. And in this problem statement, they included a quote from John Ledger. And oftentimes within your press release, you're going to want to include some sort of company quote from someone hopefully important. And then it's really nice to also add a customer quote in if you have that as well. So this is the problem statement. And now we're going to move on to looking at more of the solution. So I said that in this example, we kind of talk about the problem and then the solution. So you'll see that there's a sort of a transition within one paragraph. So here's the solution. So we're going to give you this T-Mobile money. There's no fees, no monthly overdraft or transfer fees, and they start talking about all the keys. Now, one thing to remember in these problem and solution statements is if you have any data that you can throw out there, it's a really good time to do that. And you can see here that in this product case, the solution keeps going on. So this is a pretty interesting product, has a lot of good information about it. And so T-Mobile really took the time to fully describe all of the benefits. And now the cincher. You gotta have a call to action. What do you want the customer to do? And usually you're gonna want them to go buy something, or you're gonna want them to look up more information, but you gotta have a call to action. And this is like kind of your wrap-up messaging. And then after this, you may have some additional information about contacts. I'm not gonna go into that part, but this is a general press release. So just let's look at it overall. So here's the big press release here, the whole thing on one page. So you got the title, remember, and that needs to be real catchy. You got the subtitle, if it helps. If it's redundant, leave it out. In this case, it was really helpful. You got the T-Mobile, why, what, why, and who. Also great, you got the opening statement, you got the problem statement, you got the solution statement, and what? You got the call to action. That is a press release, and this is a really great tool for product managers to write before they build a single line of code or start any kind of design work on a product. Write your press release so that you can really visualize what this is going to look like to your potential or your current customers when you're ready to launch the product. It not only helps you work out some of the kinks and think about some of the details, but it also is something that you can give to your team to provide a solid vision forward so they don't forget in the midst of building the product what it was they were trying to achieve in the first place for the customer. All right, so let's move on to another thing that you can add in to make a press release even more effective. So after you do your press release, you can augment it with FAQs. So FAQs are an awesome way to think about every question that someone might have about your product in advance and come up with answers. And your answers and your questions are not only going to help you sell your product concept, and by the way, your press release will do that too, but it'll also help you figure out some of the things that you need to really think about in advance so that you don't get to the end and have to do a bunch of iterations because you thought about that from the start by what? Going back to the future. All right, this is the FAQs for the same product, T-Mobile Money. And FAQs are just a bunch of questions. So list all the questions that you think a customer might have about your product and list the questions that stakeholders might have as well so you can prepare answers in advance. And what you want to do is you want to answer these questions, and I can guarantee they're going to make you think about some things that you need to consider in your product design and in your product build. So you're going to think about these in advance instead of having to iterate later once you launch. So the first question, an example, are there really no fees charged by T-Mobile Money? Well, here's the answer. Yes, there's no monthly fees, no overdraft fees, etc. But now as a product manager, I have to really think about this because I have to answer this question really fully. So I had to think about it and say, well, customers may incur fees from ATM providers. So there is a little caveat. So that was really important for the product manager to know in advance. Let's take a look at another question. Does T-Mobile Money run a credit check or help me build my credit? Well, the answer is no, we're not going to run a credit check. So something important for the product manager to figure out in their proposal and in their planning for the product. And then, but there is a caveat, right? So this is a bank account, and if you're delinquent or if you have issues with this account, it will end up showing up in your credit score, so you should be aware of that. And then there's something else that came out of this FAQ. The product manager looked at it and said, you know, I actually am going to need to partner with a bank because this is a banking product, and so I'm going to have that agreement in advance of my product being launched. I'm going to have to probably build some interfaces to that partner. So that's another good thing that came out of this. So just a little word of advice, answer all your hard questions first, right? Get those out of the way so that you have a plan for them. It may happen that you're vetting your product through this process and you come up with some questions that you just don't have a reasonable answer for, and you may decide to abandon your product idea, at least for now, because you don't have answers to some things, and that's okay. It's better to invest a little bit in thinking and not build anything and abandon or put something on the shelf than it is to go through the whole development life cycle, launch a product, and then abandon it in market, right? So this is just a really good way to be effective and efficient as a product manager. All right, let's talk about some guidelines. So when you complete your press release and your FAQs, they should be no more than 6 pages long combined. So that's a good thing because you only have 6 pages to fill up, right? But it's also hard sometimes to be concise and to describe your really awesome idea in just 6 pages. There's some good reasons for this 6-page. The first thing is time. How long are most meetings, right? They're usually 60 minutes. So let's say that you're in a proposal meeting, right? You're proposing this new product. You can hand out your FAQs in your press release, and people can read it right there in the meeting, and then you can have 30 minutes left over to discuss or answer questions about the product, and possibly walk out of that room with a decision to move forward, or to go back for some more information, or maybe not to move forward at all. Also, a good thing for your team. You're reviewing this new concept with your team. Let's say you got the go on the proposal, and now you're trying to describe it to the team. Again, 30 minutes to read and 30 minutes to discuss. All right, so that is the first guideline. And now I want to make a case. Let's talk about costs and benefits, because, you know, doing a press release is actually hard. It stresses the brain. I've done a few of them, and it is difficult to put yourself in the position of being in the future and thinking about everything that you'd want to say about your product, and then having to solve some of the problems that come up as you're thinking about it. So it's hard. And then going through all of your FAQs is also hard. So on the good side, if you do this, you can potentially reduce rework on your product. So you don't launch it, get customer feedback, and then have to rework your product as much. It's zero development investment. This is all product manager writing on a piece of paper investment, no development. It's, like I said, writing on a piece of paper. You're vetting your whole product just by writing it down. And then it starts with the customer needs. That's really key. You're starting with the presentation of the press release, which describes from a customer perspective why your product is exciting. And then, of course, the FAQs describe the details that help you sort of ferret out and vet some of the details you need to keep in mind. And the cost, well, it is a small initial investment by the product manager, and it is product management intensive. So this is something that the product manager needs to find time and a quiet place to sit and really put all of this together and think through the entire product concept. So I'm going to end here, and I'm just going to say that, to me, working backwards, starting with a press release and FAQs to vet my product ideas, really has little cost in the scheme of things, and it has huge benefits. And I also want to mention that this is the process that Amazon uses. So they always work backwards, and it's been pretty darn effective for them. So I recommend that you try it. And if it doesn't work out for you, that's fine. But try it, and you'll see how it really exercises your mind and helps you vet through things in advance before you start building your product. Thank you very much.